About the Canadian government. They are complicit in Israeli war crime. The Canadian government is complicit in Israeli war crime by supporting ethnic cleansing, by supporting genocide, by supporting the war crimes Israel commits on a daily basis. What do we say to the Canadian government?
Shame!
The Canadian government is complicit in these war crimes. And we say, from the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Stop the JNF! Stop the JNF!
Stop the JNF!
The JNF, you can hide!
JNF, you can hide!
You are supporting apartheid!
You are supporting apartheid!
Hey JNF, you can hide!
Hey, JNF, you can hide!
You supporting genocide!
You are supporting genocide!
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! Way too far.
Stop shooting Palestinian journalists!
Stop wounding Canadian doctors!
Stop shooting Canadian doctors!
Stop shooting, stop wounding Palestinian and Canadian doctors!
Stop shooting and stop wounding Canadian and Palestinian doctors!
Stop killing Palestinian children!
Stop killing Palestinian children!
Stop killing Palestinian medics!
Stop killing Palestinian medics!
And this organization inside here, which is sold as a benign means of supporting Israelis, is really the equivalent of something happening in South Africa in the 1980s or early 90s and having a fundraiser for it at a major Vancouver hotel. It is absolutely unparalleled and unimaginable that this kind of effort could be mounted time and time again. And to make things absolutely unbelievable, if people inside there make contributions to the JNF, they get tax deductions for their contributions. This is outrageous and it's something that we should put an end to as soon as we possibly can.
Steal the land from the Palestinian and once it's stolen, nobody aside from the Zionist is allowed to purchase or lease this land. The JNF controls with the Israeli Land Authority 93% of the land in Israel, and basically it's under the JNF control, and this land is not allowed to go outside of the Zionist movement, basically Jews. Even if you are Israeli citizen, which 20% of Israeli citizens are non-Jews, they can't lease or buy from the Jewish National Fund. That's why we say the JNF is a racist organization. The JNF is a racist organization. What we say? JNF is a racist organization. The JNF is a supremacist organization.
The UK and Europe, part of the imperialist bloc, which are starting wars of aggression all over the world, particularly Middle East, particularly Palestine. They've colonized most of the world. They've exploited the resources of most of the world. They've raped women, killed children, and defied international law constantly. When we look at Israeli occupation of Palestine and the Canadian and American support facilitation and maintenance of this occupation, we must consider that Israeli occupation defies international law on every level. For 70 years, the U.S. has been illegally occupying Palestinian land. This is Palestinian land. There is no Zionist entity. The Israel and the U.S. have defied the Oslo Accords, the Geneva Convention, any attempt at peace done through the UN. We reject this. Any peace activist, any anti-war individual in the world must reject U.S. and Canadian complicity in apartheid.
Our organization stands in complete solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinian people. Shame! And especially for their right of return and for the descendants to come back to the land that is rightfully theirs. And we particularly remember the destruction of the free villages that the Jewish National Fund used to create their Canada Park. And for this reason, we stand in solidarity with the demands raised at this protest against their tax-free status. And so we also recognize that, like all the other speakers have already mentioned, that the history of Canada and is, supported the partition plan and, contributed to the displacement and what we see today, the condition of the Palestinian refugees by being complicit in the bombing in Gaza and what is going on in the West Bank as well. And so for this reason, ILPS in Canada denounces Canadian complicity, and we support, the aspirations of Palestinian people.
Yalu, Yalu, don't you cry.
Yalu, Yalu, don't you cry.
Palestine
Will never
die.
Palestine will never die.
Beit Nuba, don't you cry.
Don't you cry.
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die.
Yalu, Yalu, don't you cry.
Yalu, Yalu, don't you cry.
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die.
Amwas, don't you cry.
Hamas, don't you cry.
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die.
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry.
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry.
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die.
Free, free Palestine.
Being a partner in Israel's war crimes against Palestinian people, occupation of Palestinian lands, and genocide of Palestinian people. We also denounce the Canadian state for its complicity towards Israel's Zionist state and to provide tax breaks to its partner JNF. Since the formation of the Zionist state of Israel, there has not been a day when the Palestinian blood has not spilled on their own land. JNF Canada Dinner and fundraiser, which is happening right here on the stolen lands of native nations by the Canadian colonizers, and funds raised by JNF are used to cover Israel's war crimes on another stolen lands which belong to Palestinian people. Everybody knows about the story of Canada Park, raised on the ruins of 3 Palestinian villages. We demand that the tax-exempt status of JNF is scrapped immediately. This is important because we don't want any more tax-free money for JNF to aid the Israel's apartheid state. We are in solidarity with the Palestinian people demand and right to have their territories back, which were stolen by Israel in 1967. We are in solidarity also with the right of Palestinian people to have their capital in East Jerusalem. We at Eastern Defense Committee strongly believe and vociferously say that Zionism is racism and fascism. We call upon Canadian people to expose the Trudeau's Liberals for their support of the Israel state and the tax deductible status for the JNF.
In condemning the Jewish National Fund and its land-grabbing practices that have displaced thousands upon thousands of Palestinians from their lands. Since 1901, the JNF has been tasked with purchasing land in Palestine, which is to be exclusively held for and used by Jewish settlers. Shame! Having been colonized by Spain for over 300 years, and the United States for nearly 50 years more, the Filipino people can only see the JNF as a tool for Israeli colonialism. When the colonial state of Israel was established, it displaced at least 700,000 Palestinians. The JNF was then tasked to take the lands of these displaced Palestinians and turn them into parks filled with non-native European vegetation.
In 47, 48, all the land of the so-called absentee, and absentee means even if you moved from one town to another within the state of Israel, you are absentee. And the 750,000 who were forced out of their homeland also were called absentee. All their lands and property were taken over by this criminal organization that's called the JNF. This is not buying land, this is stealing land. And we say to them, stop the theft, because this land belongs to the Palestinian for eternity. Whether you like it or not, whether your patrons in the United States and Ottawa like it or not, this land is Palestinian and will stay Palestinian for eternity. Stop the theft. Stop the persecution of Palestinians and stop the war crimes against the Palestinian people. No force on earth will bring it back into the bottle.